Star Trek, Behind the Fold. Written and narrated by Riley Wright. Chapter 9. Spock solidified in an empty corridor inside the planet's delegatory complex. A temporary structure, unfurnished and simple. He opened his tricorder and began to scan for life signs. 2 security guards were approaching the bend. Spock backed against the wall and pounced just as they came into view. His hands reached their shoulders before they could their weapons. They crumpled to the floor silently, faces still frozen in shock at the sudden attack. Making sure that he was alone, he quickly touched one of the guards' faces. "They are not involved. My visit was truly unexpected," he gleaned, straightening. Spock utilized his tricorder again and pinpointed a single life sign, Vulcan, coming from a closed room up ahead. His lips tightened. This will be difficult. Time was running out, and no other alternatives presented themselves. He approached the doorway and rapped upon it lightly, snapping shut his whirling tricorder. The door opened to reveal a young Vulcan woman. Though her face was characteristically vacant, she still radiated a mysterious beauty. With dark, curious eyes and uncommon short brown hair framing her imp-like pointed face. Spock was momentarily taken aback by the pleasant surprise. Was she aboard the Enterprise? Surely such a face like that would not be easily forgotten, particularly by the captain. She blinked at the sight of him, equally caught off guard. "Commander Spock?" she asked. Her voice was smooth and inviting, despite having an adverse nature to such emotions. "Have we met before? If only that was an assurance of trust." Spock saluted her. "I do not mean to intrude." "Of course, Commander. Your intrusion is a welcomed one. Please, come in," she offered, stepping aside, her pale silk robes flowing gracefully in her midst. Spock obeyed, taking in the small room as he entered. Candles were lit in the far corner, and a traveling bag lay beside a bed, neat and untouched. "Forgive me, but do I know you?" Spock asked, as she closed the door behind him. She faced him. Spock expected to see a hint of confusion at his question, but there was none. "No, we have not personally met. I was aboard your vessel, but kept to my quarters, unlike the rest of the delegation." "I see. Is there any change worth reporting?" She didn't immediately respond. Instead, she blew out her meditation candles serenely, back turned to him. "Is that why you are here? For a report?" she finally asked, dodging the question. He approached her. "My business here is unofficial. The Enterprise was destroyed, and I am investigating the cause." She finally gave him a quizzical look. "And what is there to investigate on Daran V?" "It was our last stop before the incident. That is all I can recall, as my memory suffered injury upon escape. Anything that you could add would be helpful." She stepped toward him, closing the gap. Her face was unreadable once again. "I have nothing to add, Commander. Your ship dropped me off, and that is the last I heard of it." "Then why is the planet ignoring my hails?" She was now so close that he could smell her perfume. "Perfume? You came uninvited?" "I will complete my investigation," he stated simply. "That remains to be seen." She thrust out her hand toward him, as fluidly as a viper, but he was ready for it, securing her wrist with a vice-like grasp. He noticed a loaded hypospray in her hand, and quickly disposed of it underfoot. "Admiral Kozak planted you here to intercept me. A logical move, but ineffective. We share an understanding and a mutual goal, Spock, she hissed, trying to free herself. Spock's arm began to shake slightly from the exertion. His body was still recovering its stamina and strength, and Vulcan females were considerably stronger than human males. She noticed his weakness and changed tactics, bringing her knee up sharply into his gut. Thrown off balance, he released her. She ran to the comm speaker fastened to the wall and paused, her face almost pleading. There is still time for you to join us. As a Vulcan, how can you expect me to join that which I do not understand? Your understanding requires information that I am not liable to give. She tilted her head. It would seem we have reached an impasse. How regrettable. She pressed the comm button. Intruder alert! Room 107! Spock whipped out his communicator. Now, was all he said, watching her with a mixture of disappointment and pity as he shimmered from her presence. The situation, he asked as he took in the flashing red lights coming from the helm console. We are under attack. Shields are holding at 48%, Sarek answered, about to raise them again now that he was safely aboard. Not yet. I require the helm for a moment. Sarek surrendered it to him. Were you successful? On the surface, no. Spock turned from the console. Everyone watched as the transporter pad shimmered and a Vulcan female appeared, looking rather outraged at being captured. Her livid eyes locked onto Spock and she dove for him. Sarek easily stopped her, initiating a nerve pinch before she could defend against it. He shot Spock a deeply disapproving look as she sagged against him. She was the only one in the vicinity and has admitted to being a conspirator, Spock explained, raising both shields and cloak and breaking orbit as planetary weapons fire rocked the vessel. Another loyal follower, Kevin remarked. We might finally discover why so many of our people are supporting him, Spock said. What if... Kevin began, stopping himself short. Go on, Mr. Riley. Kevin sighed heavily, as if already regretting what he was about to say. What if you discover that Kozak's plan makes logical sense? That it might even work? Sarek gently placed his burden on the cot, handing Amanda a small phaser they found in one of the boxes. She stood guard over the sleeping woman as Sarek answered. You believe that logic alone would sway us? He shook his head. I can very easily assure you, Mr. Riley, that our logic is also morally bound. Kozak has committed acts against the Federation that he must account for. If we are to defeat the Romulans at the cost of ourselves and our ideals, then who really is the victor? Kevin's face blushed slightly in embarrassment. I understand, sir. I'm sorry. It is forgotten. They were well hidden on the dark side of a large moon, orbiting an uninhabited planet. The moon was pale blue, glittering as the closest star reflected off its icy surface. Kevin almost preferred it over what they were about to do. Amanda's captor had deserved it, but now that Kevin's emotions had settled, he wondered how thin the line was between right and wrong. Spock had melded temporarily with beings many times, with or without their knowledge or permission. But touching a mind merely to gather a quick impression or truth seemed insignificant when compared to a full-blown violation. Kevin likened it to the difference between ransacking a house and slipping through the back door to steal a single coin off a shelf. Is it not wrong, Sarek, to break into this young girl's mind? Amanda asked quietly, giving voice to their shared inner struggle. I will touch nothing else. I seek only that which concerns the Admiral and his plans. I just can't help thinking what Spock went through. Amanda, our son was treated in ways I never thought possible for a Vulcan to do to another. Actual memories were taken, and his mind was damaged by the attack. Sarek approached the sleeping woman, kneeling beside her. What I intend to do will leave no lasting effects. If there was any other way to obtain this information, I would take it. He waited until Amanda slowly conceded and reached toward the girl, inwardly agreeing with his wife, though he tried to shield this from her. I am a diplomat, but one must always be prepared should diplomacy fail. To what end can one strive to resolve a conflict before crossing the line? When does a diplomat become a soldier, and can the soldier ever hope to become a diplomat again? Sir, they just left Daran V. You were right, Santos admitted, impressed, as he had watched his small ship raise shields and take off. There's no way I can tail them now. What do you want me to do? Contact Daran V. I have an operative stationed there, Miss T'Pel, who I must speak with. Santos complied, his face crumbling at the news. Sir, they've taken her. Kozak chuckled softly. What an interesting turn of events. He smirked at Santos. Don't worry, Ramirez. They're still good as ours. He closed the transmission, the hum of the ship's powerful engine beneath his boots, as he relaxed back into his chair. Aside from the strange glowing vial upon his desk, there were few other decorum in his quarters. Everything was clean, orderly, fitting to his admiralty, from the framed display of an honorary medal awarded to him during his captaincy, to the Starfleet regulatory plaques. Kozak smiled at the medal as it glinted beneath an overhead light, recalling the situation in which it had been granted to him. Romulans had attacked a Federation outpost. At the time, Starfleet suspected Klingons behind the intrusion. But Kozak knew better, even then, when he wasn't much older than the prodigy Kirk. The attack was too clean and deliberate, as if the enemy were trying to gauge how the Federation would respond, or what they could get away with. It was a military base, and so he did not expect to find civilians upon beaming down to the surface. To his horror, that was exactly what he found. A little girl. She had been slaughtered with the masses. Someone's daughter, treated with the same cold indifference as the officers stationed there. The smile fell. The reward had come with his retaliation. He took his ship straight into the now off-limits Romulan neutral zone, acting on a hunch that a scout vessel remained. Like an arsonist, they had stayed back to watch the flames, secretly monitoring space communications under cloak. Kozak was physically blind to their whereabouts. It was pure tact that allowed him to see and understand. How his bridge crew doubted him, thought he had lost his mind when he gave the order to fire at seemingly empty space. The resulting attack silenced all doubts as they battled the alien ship. More ships joined in the fray, with Kozak emerging victorious in the end. Did he kill the bastard that had slain the little girl? The thought kept him up many nights afterwards. Peace. That was the new slogan. Starfleet had grown soft, more enduring, even as attacks continued and more innocents perished. There is only one path toward lasting peace, Kozak murmured. And he that is brave enough to go against the current of insanity often appears, from their perspective, to have lost his mind. Kevin held his breath in the silence as they waited for Sarek to finish the grueling task. Amanda still kept the phaser trained on the woman, should she wake and attempt to repel Sarek's unwanted mind link. But all remained still, even as Sarek finally straightened, breaking the link. He faced them, failing to conceal the momentary fatigue, which was typical. Spock and Amanda noticed that he also beheld the slightest unease at what he had discovered. "Well?" Kevin barked, unable to wait any longer. His sudden outburst caused Amanda to flinch. Sarek glanced at the girl. "There is a part of her mind that is locked away. My attempts to access it were unsuccessful. However, I was able to ascertain a location where Kozak had a military base." "Had?" Amanda asked. "She was stationed there until the base was retrofitted into a scientific laboratory, and she was reassigned to Daran V, per Starfleet orders." Spock raised an eyebrow in interest. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Did any of her memories appear out of focus or disjointed?" "There is a strange break between her last posting and this present one." "Like a spliced old movie reel," Kevin commented. Spock nodded, understanding his meaning, despite the idiom. "Her memories may have been removed. I should think, voluntarily." "Are you serious? Who would willingly erase their memories?" "Those who do not wish to become one of the Admiral's loose ends, Mr. Riley." Kevin shook his head in disbelief. "Then why not just keep those memories under lock and key, like the ones Mr. Sarek couldn't reach?" "Just because I could not reach them does not mean that no one can. I am an ambassador, not an interrogator. The Romulans, among other races, have methods for extracting information. Even the greatest defenses can be hacked," Spock explained grimly. "Very good," the woman whispered. Everyone looked at her, startled. How long had she been listening? Kevin wondered, biting his lip. She sat up, face unreadable as she took in her surroundings. "Who touched my mind?" she asked, glancing between Sarek and Spock expectantly. Her voice was not accusatory. Sarek stepped forward. "It was necessary. I meant no harm." She studied him, almost pityingly. "You were too gentle. There was more you could have learned had you been willing to harm me. No matter. You plan on infiltrating the laboratory on planet Alpha 177. Kevin snorted. "There isn't a laboratory on that planet. Starfleet combed it over many times, including the Enterprise." The woman cocked an eyebrow in a very Spock-like display of amusement. "The planet is no longer of any interest to the Federation. It has been studied, charted, and appropriately flagged unsafe to anyone seeking to colonize. The technological difficulties associated with its magnetic ore and severe temperature drops render it useless to them." "Interesting that you should choose such a planet," Spock commented. "Is it? There we are within reach of Romulan space, while still under the protective wing of the Federation." She slowly climbed to her feet. Sarek took an involuntary step in front of Amanda. "Admiral Kozak knew that we might capture her, Spock. This could very well be a trap," he reasoned. "I am aware of this." Spock laid in the familiar coordinates. "It is a fool's errand," he murmured, undertone. "But that isn't stopping you," Kevin added, awed by his commander's stubborn dedication. Spock smirked slightly as he brought the lever down. Their ship soared off from behind the moon, its cloak raised and weapons armed and ready. "Would it stop the captain, Mr. Riley?" There was time to formulate a plan of action. Spock conferred with his father, speaking undertone, as the woman watched suspiciously from the corner. Amanda and Kevin took turns guarding her, trying to pry information in the hours that followed. "You could at least tell us your name," Kevin mumbled, having failed to solicit a single word from the stubborn Vulcan. "Favorite color?" To his surprise, she answered. "Colors are all of equal importance. As for my name, it is T'Pel." Sarek turned at the name, noticeably disconcerted. "T'Pel, daughter of Sonak, present leader of the Vashar." Her brows furrowed fiercely, forgetting all control. Does this surprise you, Ambassador? The Vishar have no children aside from the planet's security. I can assure you that my father is oblivious to me and my involvement. Her eyes flashed with triumph. My actions will force his hand. He will have no choice but to acknowledge me. Your behavior is most illogical, Spock interjected, nearly mirroring his father's expression. To go to such lengths, on pure emotionalism, forgoing reason, is un-Vulcan, she finished, glowering. You should hear yourself, Spock. To my father and others like him, you are no different. She continued in his silence. I will not be outcasted by my people, treated as inferior and unclean. They will change their definition of what it means to be Vulcan by the time our plan succeeds. T'Pel's passion transformed into one of hope. Think of it, Spock. Does that not appeal to you, for Vulcan to finally view you as one? Kevin held his breath as Sarek and Amanda listened, quietly watching. Spock averted his gaze toward the view screen. Yes, it does, he admitted. When I joined Starfleet, I did so believing that Vulcan would never accept me. His eyes sought hers again, his demeanor softening. The Admiral's plan must be ingenious, to garner such loyalty. What exactly is your role in it, might I ask? Amanda frowned, trying to read the situation. Spock was visibly beginning to side with their captive, but there was a disingenuous look about him that only a mother could see. He's bluffing. T'Pel's hopeful flame had been stoked into one of excitement by Spock's newfound interest. Even as an outcast, he had made a name for himself in Starfleet and on Vulcan. To sway him to their side would surely draw others, and reinforce her own agenda in the process. Yes, it is, and my role is vital. Will you join me, Spock? This is my final offer. He steepled his hands before him, as if truly considering it. The Romulan threat has existed for many years. To end such a threat would bring Vulcan and the entire Federation peace. You are correct in stating that we would be welcomed home as heroes. All prejudice laid to rest in light of such an accomplishment. Kevin gaped at him. Sir, what are you saying? What about moral obligations? What about the Spock is quite free to do as he pleases, Mr. Riley, Sarek stated firmly, secretly nudging Kevin from behind. Kevin wondered at the action, also noticing Amanda's uncharacteristic calm. Is this part of the plan? Spock ignored them. If I am to accept your offer, I still require some information, and you also understand that I do not wish to further jeopardize my family or friend. T'Pel hesitated, torn between desire and duty, before responding. If you surrender yourself to the authorities on Alpha, no harm will come to them. I can see to it that they remain confined to the base until our mission is completed, which will be soon. Kevin and Amanda realized that in order for Spock to be believed, they also had a role to play. Spock, this isn't right. Your father and I left home in order to help you regain your memories, not to be imprisoned on some illegal base, Amanda cried, putting her previous act on the starbase to shame. Spock averted his eyes from her as though struck. Mother, you know most of all why I must do this. It is as much for you as it is for me. Kevin wore the most outraged look he could muster, despite the pang of camaraderie he felt toward Spock for calling him friend. You backstabbing, lying. He went to dive at Spock, knowing full well that Sarek would stop him. T'Pel watched the emotional charade with growing belief. Sarek pretended to dispose of Kevin with a nerve pinch. He slid to the floor, trying to appear unconscious. I will only say this, Spock, Sarek began after a pause. If you do this, you may gain the acceptance of Vulcan. His voice grew quieter, but you will lose mine. Spock failed to conceal a genuine stab of pain at his father's words, despite their falsehood. in that expression. It was not unlike what he had seen before as a child. T'Pel approached him, her hand reaching out. She touched his arm, sending a spark up it. "What is your decision? Will you surrender your vessel and finally receive the answers you seek? I promise, you will not regret your decision." Her eyes flickered to Sarek. "Even now." Spock allowed himself to appreciate the imp-like beauty before him. She is either very accommodating and trusting, or she has a particular interest in me. He took a chance by grasping the hand upon him. She didn't withdraw, but her eyes widened in shock, as such an act was intimate, radical. "I formally surrender and agree to your terms," he said, standing and gesturing to his helm seat. She slowly released his hand and took the offered chair. He peered at Kevin, who winked at him from where he lay. "I never did believe in no-win scenarios, Mr. Spock." Captain Kirk's voice spoke from a distant memory. "If we succeed, I may no longer believe in them either."